thank you so much for joining us for Magically Live. In today's event, we'll be discussing information and news in the accessibility industry. Magically Live is a series of events that we're hosting in which we'll pick one accessibility topic each time and take a deep dive into it and share how we can help. My name is WCAG11y, and today I am joined by two of MagicEdTech's wonderful accessibility experts, Erin and Tarveen. Tarveen, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our Magically Live series. Myself, Tarveen, and I head accessibility practice at MagicEdTech. Erin?
And hi, everyone. I'm Erin Evans. I am our Director of Accessibility here at Magic. I'm located in South Florida, and we're really excited to have you join us today for this conversation.
All right, just some housekeeping before we get started. So the closed captions are enabled. If you need to or would like to use them, you can click the CC button at the bottom of your screen to enable them. And we will go through our, discussion for the first about 25 minutes, half hour, and then we'll switch over into a QA portion. So if you see the bottom of your screen, there's also a QA button. You can put any questions that you have in there, and we'll address them at the end of the session. All right. So our agenda for today, first we'll be talking about W3C updates, WCAG 2.2 and ePub 3.3, some international acts and laws that pertain to accessibility, within the United States, Canada, and Europe, and then we'll go into our Q&A.
All right, I'm going to read this disclaimer. None of the information in this presentation should be accepted as legal advice. Please consult an attorney for any questions regarding legal obligations for the accessibility of your products or website. Said differently, we're not lawyers, so this is information only.
All right, so this first poll says, which organization develops and maintains the ePub standards for the accessible digital publications? Your first option here is the W3C. Your second option is International Organization for Standardization, ISO. Your third option is International Digital Publishing Forum, IDPF. And your fourth option is Accessibility Guidelines Working Group, AGWG. We'll give you a minute to go ahead and answer. All right, so most of you answered the W3C.
And actually, Tarveen, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, sure. So earlier the standards were, anyways, we'll be talking about in the upcoming slide, but earlier the standards were being managed by IDPF, and now it has come into the kitty of W3C. And that's what the latest update around ePub and ePub 3.3 launch. So everything will be through Web Consortium now, and you'll have all the references and accessible content and the tags to be used through W3C website. Okay, Go ahead, Anjali.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, Tarveen, would you talk to us about some W3C updates?
Sure. So what we have done is we have categorized the W3C updates into two parts. First one is WCAG. So as we all know that WCAG usually used to be considered through W3C, but now ePub 3.3 is also part of W3C. So we have two different slides, and we'll be talking about both WCAG 2.2 and ePub 3.3. So let's first talk about what's the major update on WCAG. So WCAG 2.2, it's most awaited guidelines. Trust me, we have been seeing a lot of changes to the guidelines dates. So finally, we have read about it that September fall season 2023 will be the date when WCAG 2.2 will be released. Now, what are the major changes and why we are looking for these updates eagerly? Because this will be covering people with cognitive and learning disabilities. It will also cover mobile accessibility, and low vision people are being focused more through these guidelines. So this would gonna be a game changers to ensure that cognitive and learning disability people are being covered through these guidelines. So, and what is the major change? Like, new guidelines are being added. When we talk about level A, we know that guidelines related to consistent help and redundant entry have been added, and the existing guideline of focus visible, that was 2.4.7, has now been moved to single A from double A. Level AA, we have 5 new guidelines. They are majorly focused on tracking movement, authentication, target size, and focus visibility. Level AAA talks about 2 guidelines, and that's the enhanced version of what is being already covered in level AA, and that will be focus enhanced and authentication enhanced. Now, in total, we would have 58 guidelines for A and AA. That's the majority of people try to meet compliance to, and 29 guidelines are added to AAA. So this is the major update on WCAG 2.2.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to add in is the current guideline of parsing, which is 4.1.1, is actually expected to be depreciated. So that will also be part of those updates coming out. We did provide an update that went in depth on all of those a few sessions ago, so we can certainly reshare that information with you, and we'll keep you posted as that September date's approaching if anything else changes.
Thank you, Erin. Moving on to the ePub 3.3 update, as we already shared that it will be a W3C recommendation going forward, and we'll be sharing this deck so you can go through the link added to the content itself. There are many good changes to be true. The first one is that accessibility guidelines officially, ePub accessibility 1.1 will be released along with ePub 3.3. We already have a new ePub check in place to have a full support around ePub accessibility 1.1 validation through an automated process. Then there have been changes to privacy and security of the ePubs, and also what we have seen, there were standard tags like ePub type, and now there will be specific name, role, and value added to the ePub category. Other than this, we have also seen that now the metadata needs to be present in a machine like AT screen reader readable format. ePub will have more concrete conformance tags to make it compliant, and the output is readable and accessible to each and every person using assistive technologies. There is new recommendation added to the list and how page numberings would happen in an ePub. And there is an update to ensure you have conformance to EAA, that's European Accessibility Act. Now you need to adhere to that. You need to add information around that, who has confirmed that your accessibility compliance level is met. For example, you get the audit done by a third-party vendor. That third-party vendor information needs to go into the ePub metadata to ensure, yes, it is being validated and it's complying and will be readable using the screen readers. So that's the very great change that have been embedded to ePub.
All right, thank you so much for that, Tarveen. All right, we have another poll up on the screen, and the poll question reads, do you know if your country and/or state/providence has any accessibility laws? No right answer, this is just information gathering. So the first option for this is yes, I am familiar with them. The second option is no, I'm not familiar with them. The third option is I don't know if we have one. And the fourth option is we do not have one. So I'll give you a minute to go ahead and answer that. All right, and most people answered yes, and I am familiar with them, which is lovely.
Awesome. All right. Let's talk a little bit about, we're going to kind of switch gears and head into different acts, laws, declarations, information on accessibility internationally. So on the screen here on the left-hand side, there is a graphic that is the world map, and there's just a couple of pinpointed places where there are some very specific laws in place around protecting the rights of people with disabilities and specific to digital accessibility. It's really important to understand that the way that things are structured is that there are declarations, which if you may or may not be familiar with the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, which initially did not take into account the rights of people with disabilities. So there was then a second declaration that is called the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities. And that has been accepted by most people, most members and nations in the United Nations. So those are more or less declarations, acknowledgements of protecting the rights of all humans. And then beyond that, in specific continents and specific different regions within the world, as well as states or provinces or countries have created their own laws. This is showing that there is a universal drive toward acceptance and inclusion, especially in the digital realm, but most importantly, just understanding that we're all human and, trying to remove any barriers and any discrimination. And what we're going to do for the remainder of this conversation is focus on a few places, which will be the United States, Canada, and Europe. That's not to discount any of the other countries out there or any of the other laws. That's just where we are focusing our conversation. So we'll start with the United States. And there's a couple of key points here on the screen. In 1973, the Rehabilitation Act was passed. And the Rehabilitation Act has two main sections in it that people often refer to, especially in the accessibility world. So Section 504 includes information where it is protecting individuals with disabilities from discrimination. This is comes into play when we're talking in an educational standpoint, when we're talking about equal access to schools, in employment, and these are federal laws, so these apply to the federal government, but oftentimes one of the downstream effects is when private companies see this legislation and the rules that our government has to follow here in the United States, oftentimes those private companies follow suit. So this, while federal laws oftentimes seeps into the private sector, which we see in general in the accessibility world. Section 508 is the section specific to the digital and information technologies. So this is requiring that all of those electronic information goods and services that are purchased with federal funds are accessible. So in the United States, when we're talking about Section 508, compliance with digital accessibility, it's saying that if I am purchasing through the government or using government funds, that I need to have knowledge that my information and my product is accessible, it is usable, it meets those four pillars of the perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. So that is a snapshot of Section 508 in the Rehabilitation Act. In 1990, the Americans with Disabilities Act was initially passed, and there were some amendments in 2008. And the ADA prohibits discrimination just as other civil rights does. And it prohibits discrimination due to somebody's disability. And again, the other civil rights laws were not specifically calling out protection for people with disabilities. And to get to the ADA in 1990 was much like other civil rights laws, took a long time, a lot of advocacy, a lot of efforts. And that has been the law of the land for the more than 30 years now. One thing I want to just kind of circle back on when we're talking about in the US and the impact that these have, when you see that, again, that the government is requiring that accessible technologies and accessible information, that rolls into other areas, private businesses, people who are building apps even if they're building internationally and they want to use them and sell them in the US, they think about that. And most importantly, it is showing again those efforts of inclusion throughout the country to make things easier for everybody, regardless of their abilities. Tarveen or Anjali, is there anything you want to add to that?
I think, Erin, you have covered it wonderfully well. And most of the EU, like when we talk about United States and the product that we review, people try to target to WCAG 2.1 AA compliance, not only limiting to Section 508, but we have seen a lot of changes and improvement in acceptance to the overall compliance.
I think you two covered it beautifully. Alrighty, I think that we have another poll for you guys.
We may be having technical difficulties.
We are
poll at this time, but that's okay. We'll just move on. All right, Tarveen, can you talk to us a little bit about Canada and what the laws look like over there?
Sure. So when we talk about the oldest law and what we usually end up hearing from people in Canada or across the globe, that they usually label Canadian law as AODA because the oldest law among the provinces is Accessibility for Ontarians with Disability Acts, that is AODA, and it complies to WCAG 2.0 level AA compliance for both public and private sector web content. Now, when we talk about Canada law, it's actually Accessible Canada Act that was published in 2019. And this actually recognizes the existing human rights framework that is in place, and it includes 3 sections in total. One is Canadian Charter for Rights and Freedom, Canadian Human Rights Act, and Canada's commitment as a state party to UNCRPD that Erin has already covered. The Accessible Canada Act actually helps build the entire framework and is proactive, and systematic approaches being followed to ensure and remove barriers towards accessibility. And as per the latest information that is published by CNW Group, there's a large set of investment that is being done through Accessible Technology Program within Canada to support organizations in developing new devices and technology solutions to help Canadians with disability participate in digital economy. So that's how Canadian Act has been accepted, and we have seen people shifting and thinking towards the compliance to ensure inclusion for all.
Yeah, and one thing that I would like to add on this is that obviously, as Tarveen mentioned, the AODA is probably the best well-known, but many of the provinces each have their own accessibility laws, and those all feed under the Accessible Canada Act as well.
Thank you for that, Katie. All right, Erin, can you talk to us a little bit about Europe and what the laws look like over there surrounding accessibility?
Sure. So in Europe, we have, similar to what the United States has with Section 508 as a procurement guideline, you've often probably heard of EN 301-509. And those are procurement guidelines in Europe for how to purchase and how to make sure that those the information and technologies are all accessible. So that is the European standard for digital accessibility. We've talked in the past about the different conformance reports that are available out there, and the international one includes information that aligns to both WCAG guidelines as well as the EN 301-549. So the community, when you're thinking about selling, you might be a company that is based out of South America and you're thinking about selling your products across the world. When you're thinking about how do I make sure that I communicate this information clearly, there are different ways through those conformance reports that we can make sure that those alignments are clear, so you don't have any issues when you're going to share that information with those potential clients. The EN 301549 is followed by all 28 European Union member states. Also EFTA countries that include Iceland, Norway, and Switzerland, and EU candidate countries, Turkey, and the Republic of Macedonia. And if I forgot anything, again, not an expert in Europe. The second item that you have that is listed here is EN 17161:209, which is Design for All for Accessibility. And this is really more designed to help countries and organizations identify accessibility requirements. I don't personally have as much information on how this is utilized across, but it's really, I wanted to make sure to throw this in here because it's not just about the procurement, but it's also being able to provide information and help you guys identify those requirements. This CEN, which is the European Committee for Standardization, is an association that brings together the different bodies for these national standardizations here over in Europe. When we're talking about Europe as a whole, it's really important to see on here that the goal, much like other countries we've discussed, are to make public websites, mobile applications accessible. This is all in the digital specific. There's also goals and items out there in the physical environment to help bring different standardization and different access across Europe to help support people with disabilities. Parveen, is there anything you would like to add with this?
No, I think everything is covered wonderfully well. Thank you, Erin.
Okay. And the last note on there is the directive of the Web Accessibility Directive does feed into the European Accessibility Act, which Parveen is going to share some more detail about in the next slide.
Thank you. So moving on to EAA is again part and right from UNCRPD, that's UN Convention on Rights for Persons with Disabilities. And EAV, it's the hottest topic right now because people have started thinking, talking, and planning. There is a recent IAP session that happened for 2 days of conference, and it covered almost every minute information and detail to help people understand from basic what exactly EAA is and what needs to be taken like as core pointers if you move out of that session, and then how it can help you pick up your requirements and start. I know there's still 2 years, but this is the right time to plan, evaluate, and see where are we and what we want to achieve, because it's not a one day task or a step to be followed to reach and meet the compliance. It is a journey that as an organization we need to follow, and it's not about one type of component in the market. It's about all the products, website, platforms, whatever we have need to be compliant. And when we talk about EAA, as we all know that EAA doesn't only talk about websites or the content or digital content, it talks about other products and services like your computers, operating system, your ATM machines, smartphones, TV equipments, banking services, ebooks, and e-commerce. So all that are being categorized and taken into consideration to ensure we have inclusion for all. And EAA is something like when we talk about US and EAA, we have seen that like still a long journey needs to be followed, and you should start now. That's the right time to start thinking, planning, budgeting, and having a complete ownership of a person in your organization to reach at this level. We should be ahead of this journey, to be very true.
Agreed, Parveen. And I think another important thing, just to reiterate what you said, is that it's not an overnight switch, as we've talked about often with accessibility. And it's not just about one type of asset. The ebooks are definitely a piece of the puzzle that have been highlighted But when you're thinking about the content that you're producing out of Europe or that you want to sell internationally into the European market, this is going to expand. It's going to be more inclusive of the content, the platforms, and really the work that we're seeing happen in other countries is the progress that we expect is going to continue to happen. So as Tarveen mentioned, the more you can think holistically and be as open-minded and as available as you can to start making changes now, when it comes time for this to come into effect in June of 2025, you might have some pieces already compliant and you're working on others, and that'll be really good because then you'll be able to be transparent and communicate that information to your clients.
Absolutely, ladies. I think that you did a wonderful job covering all the important laws and guidelines. Now we have another poll for you. What are your current needs and initiatives around accessibility? The first option is improving website accessibility for people with disabilities. The second option is enhancing digital content accessibility, such as documents, videos, and multimedia. The third option is ensuring physical spaces and facilities are accessible for individuals with disabilities. The fourth option is implementing inclusive design practices across products, services, and experiences. And the fifth option is no specific needs or initiatives at the moment. We'll give you a minute to answer that. Alrighty, and it seems like most of you answered implementing inclusive design practices across products, services, and experiences. And then we have a fair amount of answers on enhancing digital content accessibility, such as documents, videos, and multimedia. All are great reasons to engage in accessibility practices.
Yes, and thank you all for taking the time to provide that information.
And that concludes our discussion portion of this. Now we'll hop on over into the QA. So we have a few questions that are waiting for us. Tiffany asked, just to confirm then, if we want to comply to US laws, so Section 508 and ADA title and Title II, should we use the latest version of WCAG to validate if we are compliant? If not, is there a Section 508 compliance checklist? Same for ADA, Title I, and Title II.
Aaron, do you want to take it up or can I answer?
Absolutely. So if you want to be compliant with the Section 508, and then the most important thing to do is have an audit completed and ensure that the auditors who are doing that will make sure that all of the compliance issues that are showing up are in alignment to the WCAG guidelines. And when we, earlier I mentioned the accessibility conformance report, there is a VPAT that is specific to Section 508. And part of completing that, there is, not only are there the guideline sections for WCAG, but there is also sections where it calls out how this complies to those particular areas of 508. So if you want to comply, then you would want to make sure that you are looking at those VPATs for 508. And yes, you are using the latest version of WCAG. I don't know the answer for the ADA Title I and II. Tarveen, do you want to add in on that?
Yeah, there's no specific guidelines that are being published for ADA Title I and Title II. The official guidelines that were published were part of Section 508 only. And we do have, as Erin rightly covered, we do have the VPAT document talking about Section 508 and WCAG. So it's up to you. You want to pick up Section 508 targeting the US, or you want to pick up the WCAG. So that's something that you need to finalize and decide on.
All right, awesome. Thank you, ladies. Tiffany also asked, for digital platform that uses third-party content like books from publishers, is this platform liable for content accessibility compliance?
Okay, so I'd like to answer that from the liability standpoint for content accessibility compliance in a platform that actually ends up using third-party content may vary. Firstly, I would recommend that consult a legal professional for any specific obligation or liabilities. But if your platform is enabling authors to write the content and put it through your panel, through your system or a platform, then for sure you need to ensure that you have all accessibility required features and enablement, so that whatever content they are creating is automatically generated as an accessible outcome. If not, it's just a reading rendering platform, then I think you should surely contact the consultants.
Absolutely. Erin, did you have anything to add?
Nope, what Tarveen said is exactly what I was thinking, so I like it when she reads my mind.
All right.
And I think our other questions that we have in the box, one was, I think, meant for the chat. I did see in the chat, as well as in this question, it would give for future polls, it would be a good option to select more than one for specific questions, as well as offering an other option. So I've noted that down as something that when we do future presentations, we'll be sure to include that.
Absolutely. All right, we have another question from Anonymous. For the EAA, are we safe as a publisher to focus on ebooks and e-commerce site to meet requirements? We have course management platforms also with test banks, application-based activities, virtual labs, etc. These are all on their accessibility journey, but our assumption is that the EAA will require the ebooks to and their full supply chain to be compliant, not the course management platforms.
So that's a really good question. Yes, I think that the best place to start would be what's listed explicitly in the EAA. So the ebooks and the e-commerce sites, as Tarveen mentioned earlier, are clearly laid out. We would recommend focusing on that as well. And also in regards to the platform, sometimes it can get a little bit muddy because you do oftentimes part of your ebook experience is through the platform, but from a prioritization perspective, we would want to look at how your ebook is being delivered and how that ebook itself is accessible. And then we could build out a strategy to help support bringing in those other elements into compliance, not because you're trying to comply with the law, but because you want to do what's best for your users and you want to be thinking about your user experience. And a large part of that user experience is that accessibility. If you're thinking just from a compliance with the law standpoint, then you're going to focus on your ebooks and e-commerce.
I just wanted to add one thing here, is that you should build up a plan and approach instead of like picking everything. I think, yes, because your key focus area is ebook and e-commerce, just prioritize that. But test banks, virtual labs, platform, everything should be part of your plan, because you can't consider only an ebook to be made accessible and platform is not accessible. How a user will traverse and reach your ebooks unless your platform is not accessible?
Yeah, I think said a little differently. Yes, it's important to think about what are your legal requirements, what are you looking to comply with, but you also want to take a step back and look at your user experience as a whole. As Tarveen just said, how is that user going to be able to access the ebook? And then how are they going to be able to use the other elements within the platform or within the course?
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right, we have another question from Tiffany. And she said, I'm not sure I got it right. To give me more context, we are an online library, so all of our content comes directly from publishers. We have no control whatsoever on how they create their content, so we are just liable for the content as well if we don't own it, but just service it through our platform.
So yeah, go ahead, Tarveen.
No, go ahead, Erin. No worries.
Yeah, so that is a good question. And you as a reseller or providing that content, what you would want to do is you would want to push back on your publishers and make sure that they are providing you those EPUBs to be accessible. If they're unable or can't do that, then you would want to consider before you share it out that you work to get those remediated if you have the rights to do so. Parveen, what were you going to say?
Yes, we have worked with one of the partners in the past. So first is that they ensure that their entire online library is fully accessible. They ensure that the books, the login, all the features that are there to access the content through different publishers. But what they have done in the backend is when I as a publisher try to upload a EPUB, my system used to validate whether it's accessible, meeting the basic requirements or not. If not, it doesn't allow me to upload the final EPUB to my platform. So that's the check we should enable within our platform to ensure that we are giving a message to our publisher or the people who are using our platform that we comply to accessibility, and any content that goes through our system needs to ensure compliance.
Definitely. Thank you. All right. And Miyuki asked, are there various government starting to specifically talk about accessibility overlays yet? Jay, sorry.
I'm going to talk about accessibility overlays, which is please don't use them. So to specifically answer your question, I have not heard of any governments that are specifically starting to talk about overlays. Within the accessibility community, we try to encourage people not to use them, but explain why and how to fix instead. So let me give you a bit of an example. Oftentimes you may go to a website that you might see in the one of the corners, the little Vitruvian man, the little accessibility icon. That typically means that that website has what's called an overlay, wherein if you were to open up that feature, you would see different various ways that you could increase the font size, or you could change the color, or you can do some things that look like it's making your site more accessible. The issue is that, and this has been well documented, that users who are working with screen readers or assistive technologies actually find those to block what they're doing and make it more challenging to utilize the website. When you utilize or turn on one of those, for instance, it could give you focus on just one certain part of the website. That's the product, the software telling you as a user how to go through the website, whereas everybody has their own way of what they may want to focus on. So it's not necessarily the best user experience, as well as people who use screen readers or other assistive technologies have their own preferences set up. And when the overlay is turned on, it actually overrides those innate preferences, as well as that only works for that particular website or page. So then if you go to another website, it's not necessarily the same overlay product, it's not necessarily the same experience, and it's more cumbersome. That said, it is, if you see it, or if governments, you start to hear people talking about it, that is bringing awareness to accessibility. And what's more important is to have conversations like these where you understand what needs to be fixed at the back end, right? There's not one line of code that can fix your accessibility. What you want to think about is how was it built to begin with? Where can we fix our native code so that it's automatically working with the screen reader and not causing more problems?
All right. Awesome. Thank you for that answer, Erin. And our next question is, do you have more information about the ePub updates and privacy and around privacy and security?
So we have a good long list of what exactly the privacy and security implementation have been done to ePub 3.3, but I'll quickly talk about it, what it is. It actually talks about how people actually end up misusing or giving the wrong information about their metadata information, the publication details, and usually end up copying the content to avoid all the threats to the content, and also ensuring the security of the content that is being generated, not allowing anyone to copy or paste your content. All those security and privacy related updates are being done so that whenever you end up creating a package and upload it to a required platform, it is fully secure and no like hacking to be done to your ePubs.
Awesome. Thank you, Charveen. Okay, another question from Anonymous says, what are the recs for dealing with the focus issue vis-a-vis time-based assets?
I'm not sure when you're with the focus issue. I don't know if you mean with the changes that are coming for 2.2. So I don't know whoever added to this, if they want to add additional information in the Q&A, and Charveen, if you can decipher that differently, feel free.
Yeah, what I understood, I just try to elaborate, or if you can rephrase the question better. My understanding is that you wanted to ask about how a time-based asset can be made accessible and how the focus issue can be resolved. If that's the ask, just comment yes or no in the. Oh yes, okay, so I'll answer that, thank you. So what happens is, whenever you have a time-based media, I know that few of the questionnaires and the content are time-based. So what we do as to make it compliant is, either you gather the data of your user at the initiation and try providing additional time for the user through your system, or there should be a provision for a user to pause or ask for additional time before sitting into your examination. That these are the two alternative mechanisms that can help people who don't want a time-based media. And you can also have a timer in a reverse manner, instead of like just ticking that you are at 000 now. You should provide a time, like it should continue to increase and should end when user ends. So it will not be a time bound, it will not cause seizures like, oh, I am about to end, I haven't yet finished. But you can track the performance in an alternative way, that this user has met the required time frame of completing this asset, instead of recording it in a reverse manner and giving a tick tick sound. Avoid using that.
Thank you, Charveen.
All right, thank you so much. And we have one last question. I'm new to this field. I just sat for my CPAC exam last week, so forgive my naivete. Me too. I also sat for my CPAC exam like 2 weeks ago. Is this feature on a website considered an accessibility overlay? And it's a link to level access.
So I opened up to make sure, because Level Access is another consulting company. They don't use overlays. I can guarantee you that, but I checked, and it's a very good question, Heather, because when you click on that link, which is just their homepage, what you see is a chat bot. So the what pops up in the bottom right-hand corner is the little chat that, welcome to Level Access, chat with us, take assessment, technical support, or learn more. That is not an accessibility overlay. That is just a typical chat bot. Level Access is actually a very compliant website, so they're good. They're not going to be making any overlay mistakes, I promise. However, you may go to a website, and I don't have one off the top of my head, but it would look maybe similar to that, where there's a little accessibility icon. And if you were to click on it, you would get a similar pop-up or modal that would come out, or something that would pull out from the side that would give you options to make your site accessible. That would be an example of an overlay. And I know we've talked about kind of like a miscellaneous session for Magically Live. So if we were to do one of those, maybe we could pull up some examples to show you what isn't recommended and then the right path forward. But that is definitely not an overlay, Heather.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Erin. And those are all the questions we have right now. Any last minute ones? I'll take that as a no. All righty. Well, thank you so much for joining us for this session of Magically Live. Our next session is scheduled for July 26th at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, and we'll be talking about color contrast and improvements for accessibility in that area. All right, I'm EAA11y. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you all.
everyone.
Thanks
We're
for
so glad
joining.
you were here.
Bye.
If you have any questions between now and the next session, feel free to reach out to us at accessibility@magicedtech.com. Otherwise, we look forward to seeing you in a future Magically Live.
Thanks all.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.